So kind of wild times, Casey. Starting with yourself, boy, when you're running for, of course, a second term, you probably didn't have any idea what you were getting into when you ran for your first term. I don't think any of your colleagues did.
I don't think anybody did. It's really interesting because the whole dynamic of when you run to when you actually get to serve. You go down there, you get like you're going door to door, you're talking to people, you're riled up, and you're ready to go kind of have like fights down there, and then you get down into Montpelier and you realize everyone down there is just like you. They're there to serve. They're there to help their constituents out. Everyone has a reason why they're running, and it's usually a good reason. And so you get assimilated to how do we play the game here? How do we make a difference? What do we have to do? And then just as a freshman legislator is getting ready to go, you kind of get this COVID-19 happens and you completely shut down and everything changes from why I'm down there to how can I help people. And it's been a really good experience, but it's completely different than the first term or the first year we were there. So it's been a complete game changer, but it's been a really good experience.
And Mike, you get a break. Again, the legislature is out to August 25th, I guess, and so you get a break after a pretty wild several months.
Yeah, it was really wild. There are some silver linings. What it really did when I heard the speaker talking about this when on Friday, March 13th, when we basically were last in the State House, all of the things that we were having debates on really changed and kind of got pushed aside. And I'm on the House Transportation Committee, and Representative Toof's on Education, and I think both of us would tell you that the partisanship got dropped for a lot of problem solving. Yeah. And as challenging as it was almost like refreshing to just be able to work on things that weren't big, long-term philosophical or ideological questions. It was about how are we actually going to make sure that Vermonters stay healthy and that the businesses survive. And it was great to do that work. And I think both of us fielded dozens and dozens of calls helping people with unemployment, pandemic unemployment assistance program. That was a new program that got stood up, and there was a ton of confusion, and the Department of Labor got totally overwhelmed, and legislators kind of just picked up the baton and tried to help out. And it was totally different, but it really showed the strength of our state and our communities, and I'm pretty proud of the work that we did together. Right.
Mike, you're running for a second consecutive term.
That's right.
And a third or fourth overall?
Third overall.
Third overall.
Yeah. So this will, if I'm chosen to serve again this time around, it'll be my third term.
And I should note, neither of you has primary. Again, I should note the primary is not too far away, a little over a month away. August 11th, I picked up ballots yesterday, and you can vote from now till the primary, in fact. So August 11th is the primary. Neither Mike nor Casey has primary opposition, but there are two other candidates in the race. Bruce Cheeseman, the former St. Albans Town selectman, obviously a St. Albans Town resident, and David Glidden from St. Albans City, a Democrat. Looks like I get the sense you folks get different parties. Casey a Republican, Mike a Democrat. Sounds like you work together pretty well. For the record, Casey, you're supporting the other Republican in the race, Mr. Cheeseman?
Yeah, I think that...
so I've read anyway, I guess.
Yeah, I was on his press release. He contacted me, and I was able to come up with a good quote for him. And to say, Mike and I have worked really well together. I don't know how many bills we've passed together, Mike. It's been quite a few. Well, not passed, but we've introduced, and we worked really close together on a few resolutions as well. And so that's the thing about politics in St. Albans and really Vermont is you work with the people. I think our Franklin County delegation is one that works really well together. We meet regularly. We have our open. This year we had to cut them short, but we have really good attendances at our. We have breakfasts every month. We have a breakfast every month where people can come and voice their concerns. We all listen. We all talk together, and we work together a lot. So,
Mike, for the record, are you supporting the second Democrat in the race, Mr. David Glidden?
Yeah, David is a great guy.
He's also chair of Franklin County Democratic Committee?
He is. Yep, he's the chair of the Franklin County Democratic Committee.
Post you've held before.
Yeah, so he succeeded me in that post. Okay. And David actually worked for the Democratic Party a few years ago in this district.
and he moved a couple of years ago and has been serving on the downtown board. And David's a wonderful guy, and there's an awkwardness of two-seat districts where you have a great relationship with your seatmate, but the politics are such that, of course you'd like to have somebody who is more like-minded being your seatmate. And so, I think the job of the voters is to say, who do you think can do the best job? And we're all running for ourselves, really. Casey and I both have our partisan labels, and I've been chair of the county committee and tried to twist a few arms to get people to run as Democrats in the different races over the years. But when we're elected, we go down there to serve, and as Casey said, we worked on several bills together, and we have a great working relationship, even though you might find our votes on controversial issues are going to be the opposite. Yeah,
Attica, while we're talking about supporting, who are you supporting? Of course, we have a Democratic primary contest for governor with 2. You could even say 3, significant candidates. Who are you backing? Anybody for governor?
I am staying out of both of the statewide races. I want to be able to.
And lieutenant governor too.
I got a lot of friends running for statewide office right now, so I'm really trying to stay out of the fray.
Okay, Casey. What about a Republican contest for lieutenant governors of? I think some interest with Scott Milne jumping in late. Meg Hansen, I actually saw a Meg Hansen lawn sale sign down on the Lake Road. Are you backing anybody for lieutenant governor?
You're starting to see some signs pop up around the region. I've seen a few. Obviously, Phil Scott is. I'm backing him.
You're happy with Phil Scott?
I'm very happy with Phil. I've worked with him and his team. I have some good friends that are on his team that I've known personally for years. So we're able to work really well with him. I think he's done a great job during this COVID. I think he's done a great job as governor, but I think especially during the COVID crisis, he's done a great job. But lieutenant governor, I really like Scott Milne. He's one that I'm probably going to be backing. I've known Scott Milne for a few years when he ran for governor.
And incredibly, talk about an election that came so close to winning.
And I mean, a little side story about Scott Milne. His sister was a dog breeder, and actually my dog is one of his sisters. I didn't know that they were even related.
A dog reader?
A breeder.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I said, is that a job? Sorry, a dog breeder.
A breeder, yeah.
Sorry. No, really.
And so, it was just a small little tidbit that I knew about him when his sister was like, oh yeah, my brother Scott Milne, and that's how I kind of knew him. Really? But he ran in I believe 14.
And almost knocked off Peter Shumlin.
Yeah, and I really like what he has to say, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he does in the primary.
Indeed, had Randy Brock run 2 years later than he did. Of course, he ran for governor in 2012. We might be talking about Governor Brock still today.
Yeah.
Speaking of Randy Brock and Corey Perrin, the 2 Republican state senators, Mike, no Democratic candidates filed to challenge the 2 incumbent Republicans. Disappointing to you, or is that surprising he couldn't muster up any Democratic candidates?
Yeah, I think I decided when I stepped away from being the chair of the county party that I was going to take a big step away from candidate recruitment and really focus on my other 3 jobs and my family. Yeah. My mother was a Democratic candidate last time around.
Right. That's right,
and I think if there's an opportunity for her to serve and she sees an opening in the future, I think that she stays involved in the service that she does in the nonprofit that she runs and really cares about our communities. But she's taking care of her father, my elderly grandfather, right now. And we just lost my Aunt April last fall. And I think just for personal and professional reasons, this wasn't a time to mount a campaign even before COVID-19 hit. And then you add that into the mix, and this is going to be a very strange year. Folks who are not privileged enough to have done some of this work and been in the thick of it and sort of be up to speed on what's going on, and have their names sort of out there and known in the community as people who are serving. I think it's going to be a difficult year for challengers by and large. So that's another reason why a few folks that may have considered it under more normal circumstances are saying, you know what, this isn't really the year for me to run.
Yeah, that's certainly understandable to me. Talk a key issue for St. Albans City. Tell me where, again, if you're watching us live, it's Thursday, July 2nd. The new fiscal year has just started yesterday. The LOT, local option tax for St. Albans City, is that now a law in effect?
Yeah, the governor signed that yesterday. Wow. In another sort of circle of sort of non or bipartisanship, Casey and I had co-sponsored the bill, with my Democratic committee chairs that had to go through 2 committees in the House. we both signed off on the language just as the State House was closing.
Really?
And then the bill just kind of sat there waiting to be heard by the Government Ops Committee for weeks and weeks.
Wow.
And, you know, that local option tax, it had really strong support from the community on town meeting day.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's why both of us are supporting it.
Yeah.
But it's also about what it's going to fund. And the biggest thing, I think the most important thing immediately is the expansion of the what's now the Fonda site into a small park where we're going to be able to host the new location for the Rail Dispatch Center,
right.
keep those jobs in St. Albans. That's probably the most crucial initial thing. Wrapping up the neighborhood sidewalk reinvestment that we're doing, and eventually, I think with or without partnership with the town, we're going to have to do something about our pool, and that's a commitment that the city council's made to all of our neighbors, and I think has really strong support as an asset that we need here. So all of those things are important. Governor then signed the bill yesterday, and we weren't exactly sure where it was in the stack because, you know, we have about $1 billion of coronavirus relief funds and the first quarter's worth of the state budget that the governor had to kind of, you know, prioritize. But the local option tax was signed by the governor yesterday, and I want to thank Senator Parent and Tate Brooks in the administration for just sort of letting us know what was going on there. They were very responsive, and I appreciate that.
All right, talk about money. Of course, St. Albans Town approved the local option tax for the town some years ago, but boy, given the financial difficulties that probably every community in the state and the state itself, not to mention federal government's having, that's certainly some much needed money that'll be coming in for St. Albans City.
Yeah.
So that sounds like good work to get that through.
Yeah, and I was very happy to see it. And like Mike said, it was quite a ride. It passed on March 3rd, I believe,
Really?
and then we closed down March 13th for Mike to put the bill in and have it passed, and then we put it aside for about a month. And in the last couple of weeks, it was, you know, Mayor Tim Smith was on our case asking us about it every day. And we had to just reach out. And there's a lot of confusion in the State House about St. Albans City versus St. Albans Town.
Yeah,
and
I saw a reference to that.
That's what and that was kind of one of the arguments.
People saying, hey, didn't we already do this a few years ago?
So just some brief explanations, and we saw the hands quickly raised from every delegate from St. Albans, ready to explain what was really going on. But the town has benefited greatly from this, and I believe it's around 850,000 take home. Right. I think that's what we get.
For example, the town's new public works garage, I believe, was no taxpayer funds.
Right, and they were able to get it in there, and we what was the pool failed by like 37 votes, but that
very
was
tight
also,
defeat in the town, support in the city, right?
Yep, and that was going to pay for it. We're going to see a hit this year, especially a lot of the money comes, or not. I mean, I don't know what percentage, but significant money comes from Canada, and that's been shut down, and retail stores not collecting the tax on it during the shutdown. So we're going to see a hit on it, but I think the town's still going to be in really good shape with it, and we'll definitely know a little bit more the impacts of this as we go along. But it's been a wonderful thing for the town to have, and I'm very excited that the city had a very good support for it, and I'm happy that they're going to be able to capitalize on it. Yeah,
sounds like money the city can certainly use. Mike, a member of House Transportation Committee, how has the COVID-19 situation affected, if at all, I assume it probably has, transportation projects, and especially any ones up here? Has there been a big detrimental effect from that, or not particularly?
So I wouldn't say that locally there's been a detrimental effect. There's been a real shift in some of the timing of some of the bigger projects statewide. But generally, we've been able to hold the budget and the plan together. So if you think about, so the entire fiscal year budget for statewide transportation is about $615 million. About $270 million of that is state funding, and there's a little bit of local match that comes for some of the local projects, but more than half comes from federal dollars, highway administration, rail program, et cetera. And we are down. This year, we were able to fill the holes by just moving some projects a little bit and using our capital reserves just a tiny bit to balance the budget to close out the fiscal year. And, you know, with transportation, it's not like the general fund. There are these big projects that carry over multiple years, so you're able to have a little bit of wiggle. So we were down about $30 million in revenues for FY20 that just closed. We're projected to be down another 35 to 40 million. So, you know, that's 20% of the state funding. So we have a lot of options to deal with that we're going to have to address when we get back in August to do the next 3 quarters of the budget. But our approach really has been, you know, make sure that the municipalities are whole, the town highway aid and the formula funding that towns depend on. You know, when we talk about things like the local option tax, what we're really talking about is taking pressure off the property tax. And, you know, local municipalities, that's really the only way that they get revenue other than, you know, fee for service. That's to make sure that towns are able to sort of fill potholes and do their bridge projects is really important. The other piece is just making sure that we use the COVID relief money that we got. So we got in the $20 million range to help support public transit across the state and sort of to backfill some of the issues there and to make sure that we still have a bus and a transport system for elderly and disabled and folks who need medical transportation when we come out of COVID. So all of that put together means we're kind of whole for now, but the storm clouds are there. And we're going to have some tough decisions about, you know, delaying projects or maybe cutting some programs that we wanted to see unless in the federal authorization for the next few years, transportation bills in Congress get passed on about a 5-year cycle, and we're up this year for a new national reauthorization of transportation funds. If the House and the Senate and D.C. can come together and do some of the good work like we've done here in Montpelier, at least on the transportation funding, we may find ourselves in a position of being more than made whole. And so some of the language that I wrote into our modified transportation bill this year, and with the support of my chair, Kurt McCormick, he really asked me to sort of quarterback the adjustments. You know, we dropped support for new funding for the electric vehicle incentives that we had championed last year. There's still some money left from last year. I hope folks will use it if they're buying electric vehicle. You know, go support our local car dealers. I got a Prius Prime from Handy's here last year that's been wonderful. I highly recommend that as a starter electric vehicle for folks. But you know, that program, we don't have state dollars to put into that right now. And I think we all agreed on that. So we, you know, we peel back some of those priorities. But if we get a bunch of flexibility with federal dollars or an influx of federal stimulus, we'll not only be able to pave some projects that were a few years out early that people have been looking for here, but we also wrote in some language to make sure we're doing some things to support public transit and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm proud of striking that balance.
Let me just ask you quickly about one. I go to Franklin pretty often, about every day, and boy, one of the worst stretches of state highway that I come across around here, I think I've got the right route, Route 120.
Yeah.
From 105 near the Abbey into Franklin Village, about 5 miles. That's one. I typically kind of go the back way through Highgate coming back to St. Albans. Any chance we might see resurfacing in my lifetime on that?
So I think a complete resurface is a few years out, because what it really needs is a complete substructure.
Right. More than resurface.
Yeah, so it's going to need a lot more than just a coat of pavement, and that's why VTrans has been reluctant to spend all the dollars there. Yeah. You know, you'd be surprised, but serving on the transportation committee, you don't really get to pick the projects that get done. Our transportation advisory committees through regional planning sort of score them, and then VTrans looks at how many trips, how many accidents, what's the safety issues, and what's the condition, and there's a formula for all that. But 120's come up a lot. VTrans is aware of it. Yeah. Wayne, who's the you know, chief engineer and head of that division, has it on the wish list. So if we get a bunch of federal stimulus money, or we get increased federal match over what we've had in the past with the new authorization in the fall, we'll be able to move projects like 120 up. So that's what we're keeping our eye on that. The other one I hear about a lot is Route 7 between St. Albans Town and Georgia. There's some stretches of that are up. Those are already scheduled for the 22-23 construction season. And if we could move those up too, if we're able to secure more federal funding in the fall.
Again, folks, if you're watching us live, our number 528-5315, give us a call. Casey, a huge story locally, not good news. USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, news just out today or yesterday, furloughing about, 1,100 or so out of 1,700 employees at the service centers. or service center, St. Albans and Essex. Well, that's pretty much of a body blow.
Yeah, and I haven't seen the full report on it. I don't know what everything, all the stipulations on it are, but it's a huge blow to this area. It's a huge economic driver. I have a lot of friends and family personally that are employed by that work for INS or work for the agencies in there, and it's really hard to see. And I see it when people reach out to me. They're concerned. Their whole livelihood. They're really concerned, especially during this COVID time. There's a lot of uncertainty. So it's going to be interesting to see how we can bounce back and kind of figure out, because that's beyond our control in the state legislature. That's federally funded, and so it's going to be a tough time.
Yeah, Mike, I guess it's a largely self-funded agency, which is their problem. Their business is basically way down given what's happening. Of course, again, you're also a city councilor, but boy, that's a big hit for St. Albans. It's
a huge hit, and it's really a symptom of a complete lack of leadership at the federal level on immigration reform. I mean, I think Vermonters across parties, we heard our state economist when we got our fiscal briefing, and Casey probably remember this, said the best thing that we could have in Vermont is really well thought out legal immigration, where we encourage people to bring their money, their businesses, their ideas, their families to our state and build businesses here and raise their families here. And that's what that service is all about. And just this completely xenophobic attitude of the current administration federally, it has led to this situation. And you combine that with COVID, it's awful, and it was totally preventable. And so I think that if we are able to, God willing, get a change in the administration, and Joe Biden's the president in January, I think that'll speak, we'll be able to basically bring that back, bring those jobs back to Vermont in full force, and hopefully get some compromise in Congress around a full-scale immigration reform that says, America is a nation of immigrants. We're open to people coming here. Bring your economic activity, your families, your ideas, your businesses, your innovations. And I think Vermont has a sort of small but proud history of welcoming immigrant communities really well and successfully. And with the demographic and population challenges that we've had in the last few years, I mean, what would be better than to have good, well done legal immigration to our state? So I'm hoping that this is a really short term problem, and I'm really thankful that we've got the kind of unemployment trust fund that we have to help people across all industries that are laid off and furloughed right now during this time that's particularly bad, and will hopefully be able to rebound. I mean, we have talked to so many people who are having the worst time in their life, have worked 30, 40 years, had long careers, and all of a sudden find themselves applying for unemployment. And, I wrote to one constituent who said, I'm ashamed to say I filed for unemployment. I said, you know what? That's insurance. This wasn't your fault. You've worked hard, you paid into this program, and now you're able to get the benefit from it. And, that's why I do this service, is to make sure we have these programs in place so that when disaster does strike, there's this economic safety net for folks. So, we... that USCIS is a huge blow, as Representative Toof said, and I if anybody who is working at USCIS in our community needs our support, needs help with benefits or figuring out what's going on, there's federal support there through Senator Leahy and Senator Sanders and Congressman Welch's office, but contact your local legislators, and we'll try to connect you with services if you need it.
Oh boy, another Northwestern Medical Center. Casey also has been sounds like virtually all hospitals in Vermont have taken a big hit from the COVID-19. But boy, NMC really took a big hit. Are you close to that? Or obviously things are getting better. Elective surgeries are back, but local hospitals been in pretty tough shape. They've
been in tough shape, and they've done through all the protocols that you can. My girlfriend actually works there, and they had to move. She was working at the primary care in Georgia. They've changed everyone's hours. They've moved them to St. Albans. They closed that down. There's a lot of uncertainty there. They had a bunch of layoffs, which they're losing money. they're unable to do those elective surgeries. It's been a really tough time, and it's unfortunate to see. I've used NMC for years. Both my kids were born there. Anytime I've ever had any issue, they've done a great job, keeping me healthy. And it's really tough to see because they're such a great company in St. Albans, along with the USCIS. Everything. Great employees, and everyone's doing a great job. It's just really tough to see this kind of stuff happen at this time. Yeah,
you remember again, House Education Committee? Boy, I'm just running into a lot of questions, just a lot of concern about, we have a phone call. We'll get back to that. Thanks, caller, go ahead. You've got legislators Mike.
Thank you, gentlemen. I was just wondering the thought behind the Democrats to give themselves a raise next year when we're in such dire straits, the people of this county and the whole state of Vermont. And I'll hang up and listen to your answer. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Good job.
Roger, that volume was very low, which you may know was very low.
I think I got just what you're saying. So there's been quite a bit of internet traffic about a procedural move that happened on the budget bill last week about how legislators are going to be paid in the future.
Right, that issue is getting attention.
And man, I have gotten quite a bit of heat on Facebook about what we did. So let me just make it really clear.
How dare could you take more pay and in fact you're not getting more pay?
Right, we are freezing our pay for a year, for at least a year. And the sort of controversy is a little technical, but what it boils down to is that because we're not tying ourselves to the increase that the state employees are getting, there's a line in language in the budget bill, in a 62-page bill, on like the 60th page, that said legislators won't get an increase this year. Their future increases from fiscal year 2022, which starts a year from yesterday, basically, will be tied to when the lieutenant governor, other constitutional officers get an increase. And so those increases happen periodically, and they're inflationary. Yeah. And I woke up a couple days ago to a meme.
Cost of living adjustment.
Cost of living adjustment, right. Yeah. And so right now, legislators make a little over $700 a week when we're in session. So it boils down to about $13,000 a year. Yeah. And so if we had an inflationary increase, it would be an extra $250 or $300 a year. Yeah. We are not giving ourselves that this year. We know that everybody's struggling.
I don't think it's the best time for a pay hike, huh?
Yeah, no. The optics of that alone are bad, but the reality is that we know that people are hurting. We were just talking about people getting laid off, and we're a part-time citizen legislature. So there was a pretty much a partisan vote about whether or not we should even address the language about future pay increases being tied to constitutional officers. But the way it's been framed online is like we were choosing between giving ourselves a huge raise today and not. Yeah. And no one was voting to give themselves a raise now. The idea was that we would hitch our future pay increases to when it's economically and fiscally responsible sometime in the future to give the rest of those in elected government an increase. And, that created some controversy. It wasn't controversial in committee. There was a Republican co-sponsor of the amendment that put that language into the bill initially. But it became kind of a, beginning of the campaign season football late in the session. And that's unfortunate. But, we care about our constituents. Representative Toof and I don't think that we can afford to give legislators raises this year, and we didn't.
Okay, so again, not exactly the best time for a pay increase, right?
Right. And I supported taking that part out just because it did mention in the future. I thought it was something that we could come back to next year. Yeah. And it was just there was a procedure that was able to divide that from the bill, and so I agreed with it. It didn't pass, and we ended up I think it was almost unanimous on the final bill because we wanted to get that bill out. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's the larger point, is that I think across the CRF bills, the coronavirus relief funds, that's almost $1 billion in aid to everything from hospitals to childcare to small business grants is the biggest chunk of that that's going out right now. And the Q1 budget, those are tripartisan big votes. I mean, we both worked together on that, and those were really what should have been the story from last week. not a one line about how we might get a small future increase in 2022 or later.
Right. Casey, back to House Ed Committee. Again, just I think you'd know this way better than myself, but just a lot of concern about it. I guess the plan is for schools to reopen. We're talking next month now. We're talking August, and it still sounds like a lot of details need to be worked out, a lot of concern. What are you hearing from your constituents about that?
You know, there's a lot of concern around safety, but the teachers, the people that I've spoken to, are so excited to get back into the schools. They want to get back into the schools. They want to be with the students. I think that was the biggest thing that we saw this year was the teachers. It wasn't that they were having a tough time, because there were a lot of difficulties, broadband access issues across the state, equity issues where kids didn't have the right technology. Say you had a house with 3 people or 3 children in it, and they had one laptop that they could use, and they had to figure out when they could use it it just became a huge issue, and it was really hard. And the teachers know that the kids learn the best when they're in the school, and getting back to school is their #1 priority. But I guess above all is to keep kids healthy, keep kids safe, keep themselves safe, because they're talking the COVID, we're seeing it in other parts of the country come back right now pretty strong. We are I think we've done great steps here in the state of Vermont to kind of control the outbreaks, but you start integrating children back into school. I mean, I have 2 kids. Every time they go to school, they come back with a cold or something that I just end up getting just because they're interacting with so many different people. So that's kind of a good breeding ground for COVID to, come back. But we need to get kids back into school. The House Education Department cares. I think we care almost too much about kids. That's all we talk about is what's the right thing for the kids. And it's a great committee. First of all, it's a great committee to be on. It's chaired by Chair Webb from Shelburne, and we have a great committee. And I get along with everyone on it. It's really refreshing. And we discuss a lot about, first day I came back this year, Chair Webb looked me in the eye and said, what does a 21st century classroom look like? And I think this is going to start looking at, this is going to kind of change the way school is. They've talked about a hybrid model. Secretary French came in last week and spoke to us about a hybrid model. Hybrid model would be some can commute, some can come in. Concerns for me, my kid's going to be on the bus. My kid's going to be in kindergarten this year. Really? First year going to St. Albans Town Educational Center, and it's a big thing for us, but he's going to be on a bus. How many kids are going to be allowed on the bus? How many kids are in the classroom? He's so active and forgetful sometimes. Is he going to be wearing a mask? Can he wear a mask?
So we still have a lot of details
a lot of details to work out.
Have you been impressed with Secretary French? How do you think he's done?
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because we have a very kind of different way to do things around the state of Vermont than I think nationally. We put so much faith in our local control. And we put everything into our local school boards, who do an excellent job at setting the budgets, hiring the teachers, setting the curriculum. And we're in Montpelier. We don't try to touch any of that stuff because we say that's your local control. But when there's an issue, we have to kind of take it up. And I think Secretary French is doing a good job juggling between local control and what kind of support can the Secretary of Education or the Agency of Education give to our schools. And our school boards are great, and they've done a great job. I watch all the time. Bus still goes around my corner every day to deliver the food, the lunches and stuff. We have great staff. I went to St. Albans City School, went to BFA. We have great teachers, great staff, great administration there. And his job is to kind of, how can we help you? And I think he's done a great job with that. Yeah. Speaking
of handling, Mike, I can only assume you'll be supporting the Democratic nominee for governor, presumably either Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman or Rebecca Holcomb, the former education secretary. But aside from that, Governor Scott, how do you think he's handled this crazy situation for months now?
I have to say that I have had many disagreements with Governor Scott over the years around the long-term sort of vision and how we support working families.
Probably some more in the future.
I have very little disagreement with the way that he's approached this generally. I mean, he's done it by the science. He's really taken a look at what will keep Vermonters safe and what will keep them healthy. And I very much appreciate that. I think increasingly Vermonters are asking for clarity around the mask issue, and I appreciate him showing leadership over the last couple of days, you know, more social media posts, more promotion, because what we heard in the downtown merchants meeting that we were both on, that was just yesterday morning, was that local businesses are having to be the mask police. You know, they have a liability and a responsibility. They want to protect themselves. They want to protect other customers. Yeah. They want to make sure everybody feels safe. And when somebody walks into their business and just ignores the sign and the free masks that are there, and says, "I'm not wearing a mask, it's my right."
Yeah,
then they have to,
awkward situation.
Yeah, they have to decide, do I want to say, no, actually, this is my business, you know, you need to either wear a mask or leave. That's a terrible decision to make, especially when they're having trouble getting customers through the door in the first place. Yeah. So I would just really encourage everybody to follow the guidance, and please, if a business is asking you to wear a mask, please just adhere to their policy. Help these business owners out. I mean, our folks downtown are just doing such a great job. Representative Toof and I had lunch at Twigs before we came down here. You know, the staff and the people that are working in retail and keeping these businesses going, and the business owners who are trying to figure out how to navigate this, they need our help. Let's not make their job harder.
Yeah. And I should note, in case you're wondering, hey, why aren't you folks wearing, well, we're 10 feet apart here, so I think we're in pretty safe ground. But
we've been cut together on the screen. Yeah.
Right, don't be confused by the screen. But the staff here at Northwest Access TV is right on top of this. So, again, we're 10 feet apart here, so we can get away without wearing masks. But, yeah, it seems like it can be some very awkward situations. Speaking of another education matter, Casey, a little far from your district here, but not that far, Vermont State Colleges with the Johnson State certainly gets a lot of attention from Franklin County folks, both student-wise and employment-wise. Is there a hope for the future? It just sounds like the money situation is so tight. Is it kind of status quo, like for another year or something? Or?
So we were able to allocate some funds to help with, you know, COVID-related expenses, and they've been able to, we've talked with UVM and the Vermont State College System on what's appropriate for them, and we were able to get some money through. But when we talk about people that have reached out to us, the furloughs, COVID-19, unemployment insurance, the number one issue that people reached out to me this year was regarding the Vermont State College System. And I had so many emails, phone calls, Facebook messages, just come in and talk about their support of the Vermont State Colleges. I'm a 2009 graduate of Castleton University. It was Castleton State College at the time, Castleton University. I understand the importance of a local education that's fairly cheap. I wish, you know, we've got ourselves in an issue here in the state of Vermont. We are one of the worst funded state-supported systems in the country. So we see actually our tuition rates are a lot higher than they are at other universities. It's, you know, the last 30 years we've been underfunding our state college system, and the reality was, you know, when COVID hit, students wanted refunds. Students were unable to finish their year or you know, their room and board, and the state colleges aren't able to make enough money off just the grants from the state or anything like that, so they have to make their money up off tuition. So it's really tough. They're in a really tough position. For me to see a college like VTC, my brother Ben went to VTC, my brother Matt went to Linden, I went to Castleton. We've taken full advantage of the Vermont State College system. So
is there hope for the system? It just sounds like the finances are pretty tough.
I think we've seen such an outpour of support. I think we have a committee that is getting formed that's going to look into what the future looks like. There's an independent consultant that's going to be involved in that, and they're going to be looking at financials, financial viability, what it looks like, how it can be, you know, maybe if it's working alongside UVM. But we have a unique state college system anyway, because there's two. There's UVM and there's Vermont State Colleges. Right. So,
but Vermont State Colleges is kind of sad. They'll be back in business, or
they're planning on being in the fall. They plan on having classes in the fall. I follow Castleton State College. They're going to hopefully be doing classes at the school in the fall. That's their plan. But I mean, that goes back to the question: 21st century schooling. What does it look like? Are we going to see more telecommuting and people not spending that money on tuition? and spending the money, or not spending the money on room and board, and seeing the colleges miss out on that revenue, and you know, people missing out on that experience.
Yeah. Mike, ask you, just the racial unrest in the country, obviously a huge story along with the virus situation for a good couple months now. And I know there was, I think, a peaceful protest in St. Albans a while back, Black Lives Matter, whatever, and I think you were the one legislator, one city councilor to show up. So this issue, as you see it, is getting some much needed attention. And locally, how much attention, anything changing? And of course, the police department comes to mind, with city PD's had its issues, a new interim chief. The Burlington police situation is getting a ton of attention now with, I guess, Burlington City Council now on record trying to get a 30% cut. But anyway, big issue, but some quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are a whole host of things that are coming together. Yeah. I think it's really important for us as elected officials, especially folks like me that are cis white people, to acknowledge that, yeah, we essentially have started with an enormous amount of opportunity and privilege that other people don't have. To be able to recognize that and not be defensive about it is important. You know, we're dealing with it at my workplace in my day job of really talking through, you know, how do we take an organization that was founded and led by two white men that has a primarily
Sun Common.
Yeah, and so every organization, every business that wants to rise to this historic moment where people are really looking racism in the face and saying, how are we participating in this? Not just how are we going to not be racist anymore? How are we actually going to help stop racism? That's happening, and that's a really important conversation, and I think it should be very easy for us to say all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. So that's just such a fundamental, important conversation. But then we get into, okay, so there has been horrific police violence across our country that we've seen on body cameras, and, you know, the killing of George Floyd, you know, to watch a man die because he can't breathe over the course of, you know, nearly 9 minutes of being under the knee of a police officer. These things are horrific, and they shouldn't be happening in our country. And we've dealt with excessive use of force in different situations over the last year in St. Albans by holding officers accountable, changing our policies. And so we, in a way, those incidents of having officers that that did things that we weren't proud of in St. Albans has allowed us to get ahead and have a police force that we are proud of here. But we really need to look at how are we hiring the folks we're hiring, and what are some of the structural disadvantages we have when, you know, you basically can take somebody with a high school diploma who wants to be a police officer, send them to 16 weeks of training at the police academy, and then they're out on the street dealing with what are a host of variety of different things. And so we're really going to be asking ourselves in a process in the city of St. Albans with a lot of public engagement about what do you want to see policing look like, and also working with this outside consultant to say, how do we do our hiring, how do we do our oversight better, and how do we adhere to the pillars of 21st century policing that came out of the Obama administration. And those conversations, we want the community input, because we want to have the police be respected and to serve the community well. And we've got a great group of officers who are doing wonderful work in a really difficult environment right now. And, you know, I think having Molamoth now be the interim chief is a good chance for us as we make this leadership transition to just really be open about what we want out of our police force. But at the same time, you know, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, I saw you at that protest. Do you not support the police? And I just want to make it really clear to people, we're doing this work with the police and with the support of our police department. Our police department does not want to be seen like the police department in the Twin Cities is being seen right now. You know, we want to be an example for people to aspire to, and I think we can get there. But it's going to take a lot of work with the police, with the city council, with the community to get there.
Yeah. Casey, you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, and I mean, there's some things that, you know, we have regular meetings at NCSS, and they actually have people that work at NCSS that work with our police department. And I think St. Albans PD is going above and beyond before any of this national outcry happened. They've been working on these issues, how to work in crisis situations so it doesn't escalate. We have great officers that serve St. Albans. I think we have a very safe community. Are there issues that Mike hit on, I think, that are very important? Training is number one. And if you talk about cut funding, I don't think cut funding is the right word we want to use. I think we want to use, proper funding. What are we giving officers support? You hear stories about officers that go door to door on a welfare check and get shot at. Are they getting the support that they need when they go home? Or are they just being told, are they going home? Or just go home and take a break. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of high-pressure situations. And if you're an 18-year-old high school student, what kind of education do you have on, the Constitution and what can you do and what can't you do? So training, education, and that unfortunately is going to cost money. And I think with a budget for police officers to be able to hire, or police forces to hire well-educated, highly trained officers is something I think that would benefit the city of St. Albans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me flip over back to education. The state education fund was, I was hearing, what, 100 million shortfall, 170, but
170.
But now projecting just a 3-cent education property tax.
Yeah, so they were able to.
Is that smoke and mirrors? How
So they were able to keep
off?
it kind of at what the statewide rate was, what it was projected to be based on our property taxes that were passed.
Yeah.
Our school budgets that were passed on March 3rd.
Yeah.
So they were able to work on a bill to keep it that way. The issue is, looking forward, what's it going to look like in the years coming, because we don't have a full grasp on what impacts this has had on property taxes. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example of something. If, say, I don't work for 3 months this year because of COVID, our property taxes are based on income, so I could file and I'll pay less, and that's less money going in the system. And how many other people are going to be doing that? So in the future, we're gonna be asking our school boards to look at what we're funding and how we're paying for it, because it's the original was 26 cents was the initial what it was going to be when it was at 200 million. And unfortunately, and Mike and I had this conversation today before coming in, the federal funds that came in are completely, they came in, they have to be allocated in a certain way.
And this is about $1.25 billion.
Yeah, $1.25 billion, and they only gave, I think it was $31 million to education, and I think $11 million to higher ed. We were able to take that money and kind of work with it to help schools, but originally it was earmarked at very little. And I was in committee. I go, "Am I reading this wrong? Did we really only get $31 million to help?" And unfortunately, when we look at paying for the schools, it has to be towards expenses that occurred because of COVID. So we had to buy Chromebooks. That's an expense. We had to pay for staff to do pass out lunches. That's not the original thing. It's not to go for any kind of increases in the budget or anything that the school may have the people have approved for. We're gonna have to come up with that on our own. So that's the kind of the danger. And we'll look at that in August. We'll have a better idea of what our state income, our state revenues look like. Especially because the filing deadline is now July 15th. So we'll have a better understanding, and our JFO will be able to teach us on that.
And of course, the governor, big affordability guy, is saying, hey, we might need to cut some programs, but just higher taxes. I mean, he goes crazy with the thought of higher taxes, as do a lot of people. Are higher taxes inevitable given just the pandemic, Mike, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. So I think that what we're talking about with the 1.25 billion, and the normal entire general fund of the state budget is sort of on that same scale, right? We're like dumping all of this federal money into our economy to sort of prop us up.
Yeah.
And those funds are going out right now. This initial round of small business economic recovery grants. Yeah. If you have a small business that had in any month or quarter over last year lost 75% or more of your revenue, you're going to be able to get up to $50,000 in these recovery grants to replace that lost revenue. I really encourage people to go to the ACCD, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development website. Look at some of the information that's there now. The grants the applications will be available Monday. So that money goes into the economy. That, I think, will help keep the revenue bleed down for the next year. The question is, how many small businesses didn't make it through that year with reduced tourism, with those changes? And did we do a good job of capitalizing on the fact that, folks now have been trending away from living in rural areas toward living in urban areas, but now we see the real estate market is booming all over the North Country. I hear friends in upstate New York, their house values are going like crazy because people from the city. That's happening in Vermont. There are some issues with that, but if we get these dollars out, we can keep businesses afloat through the worst of this piece and make up for the real holes they got into in the spring. I think with some cuts and some tweaks, we'll be able to get through this year. The real question is, how do we set ourselves up for the next year? Yeah. And that's why, if Casey and I or David and Bruce, or, whoever it is that's down in the legislature, this next session is where the real heat is going to be. And the really hard choices are going to have to be made.
As in next year, talking fiscal 2022.
Fiscal 2022, yeah. So when we get to doing the budget, that's going to start basically a year from yesterday. Yeah. That's going to be the hardest budget that people have had to write in Vermont's modern memory. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is. We have all this federal stimulus money right now. If the federal government doesn't continue to kind of prop us up the way they are for the moment, which isn't nearly enough, by the way, to help all of the businesses and all of the resources in Vermont, it is going to be very challenging, and we'll have to ask ourselves a lot of questions. What things can we cut, and what can we ask of people who are doing well to help support the people who aren't? We're not quite at the point where we're ready to have those conversations or even have any idea which places the revenue is really not coming in, because we haven't even seen the income tax filings for a good percentage of Vermonters yet. So we got a tough job in August, and then we'll have an even harder job in January next year.
Any cuts you want to throw out, Casey? There are cuts. It may come down to that, but anything jump to your mind or not quite?
Right now, no. I can't think of one.
But it may come. It might have to come to a leaner state government.
And Mike did hit a good point. We kicked the can down the problem down the road. But it's something we're gonna have to address. And when you look at, I think we're gonna have to look at how we fund our education, how we fund, because our education budget's about a third of our overall budget's $2 billion.
And of course, we should note for local taxpayers, about 3/4 of their local tax bill is education, 1/4 municipal, roughly.
And I'm not saying that there's going to be cuts. I'm saying we're going to have to work with how we fund it. What does equity look like across the board? I know there's a few representatives that have been in our committee that have been pleading for equity. People that live in the Northeast Kingdom, people that live in a lot of rural areas that don't have the equity that people in like St. Albans basically have. So that's kind of what we're looking at, and it's going to be a really tricky juggle that we're going to have to do, because I'm not a proponent of. I'm not going to say I support raising taxes, and I will fight for any kind of tax increase. And I think everyone else realizes, because when they said 26 cents increase, everyone was like, no. Tripartisan were like, no, absolutely not. I don't think there was a single person that I heard that would have supported a 26 cent increase. So it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be next year's problem, and people will have a lot of work to do.
But for the record, you guys want to be part of that the next time around.
Yeah, right? I mean, you're not
running away from this, right?
Yeah. No, that's the hardest thing about the service is that right now it's just a whole bunch of question marks. It's if the revenue projection is as bad as it looks like on paper at the worst point in the crisis. If you just did that through taxes alone, 26 cent increase. Okay, well, of course we're not going to do that. We're going to look at, are there programs that we can shift? Are there capital projects that could be delayed for a couple of years? Will there be costs associated with that in terms of deferred maintenance if we do that? And those are when you drill right down to the nitty gritty, it's never a choice between just raising taxes and just cutting programs. It's about, what do Vermonters really need? And hard conversations about each and every one of those programs in our policy committees and in our budget committees. And in my committee, we have the flexibility of being able to move big capital projects around. And the fact that fewer Vermonters are on the roads, but we have more trucks than we would have thought because of the way shipping is working right now, has really changed the revenue landscape in ways that we don't even really understand yet, because we're only looking at a couple months worth of data. So we're going to try to do it by the numbers, listen to our businesses and our families and our constituents, and just really try to dig into what can we do to set ourselves up for the medium and the long term with the federal funding that we have right now. And the strings that are attached, as Casey said, to the coronavirus relief funds that we have right now, that $1.25 billion, it means that there's no way we can spend it in the way that would be the best investment for the future. And I wish, if I could make a plea to DC, like take the reins off and let Vermonters decide what to do with this money, because we'll spend it better if we don't have all these strings attached. Yeah,
down to just a couple minutes. But talking about trying to increase some more revenue, what about marijuana? Is that kind of being lost in the shuffle, maybe regulating? Of course, I interviewed Senators Perrin and Brock, and I think Senator Brock called it a money-losing venture. He doesn't seem to be too high on it, but is that not even going to come up when you come back in
Was
August?
That too high on it, a pun intended?
I'm not that smart.
Yeah, no. So the reality of it is, all the projections that we saw with the tax and regulate market are that in the first year it is a money loser.
It's a money loser.
It's a money loser initially. Yeah, because you have to set up the regulatory body. You've got to set up this whole thing, and only then can you start collecting the licenses and the tax revenue once it's all set up. I mean, it's really a 2-year process. So it might even be a money loser for 2 years.
So no reason to think that'll even come up when you get back.
But the revenue from it, I mean, when you're looking at the state is a billions of dollars. We're $1.5 billion in education, about 2 point something in the general fund. Whether you're doing the unduplicated dollars, and then $615 million in transportation, or the big ones. We're talking about, once it's all set up, best case scenario, we're talking between $15 and $20 million a year of net revenue after we fund everything else. I mean, people always, I used to sit next to a former legislator that whenever somebody would say, oh, we don't have money for this, she would say, well, you could just tax and regulate marijuana. Everybody in Vermont politics has been on the side of promoting reform around marijuana, has been saying it's going to be this big cash cow. If we had jumped on it early and been one of the first states, there would have been problems that would come with it, but it would have been more revenue. Now that states around us like Massachusetts have it, it's not going to change the game. It's not going to solve these hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue losses. It's just, it's not the panacea. I was a supporter of decriminalization, and if we do it right, I think tax and regulate makes better sense, because we shouldn't have this black market that's selling drugs to our kids, but that's not going to be the revenue solver.
Down to about a minute. You kind of you're also buying Casey.
I've heard
shouldn't get too excited.
The same thing. I was going to give you $30 million, but $15 to $20 million is probably what you'd see
net.
Net.
So. And that wouldn't even be for a while. Maybe we're down to less than a minute. Again, boy, just such a weird, tough time for a lot of people. But you folks, I sure feel like you're doing what you can, and just asking people to hang as tough as they can. Any final words here?
No, I mean, Mike and I have done, I think, a great job asking people to reach out for us, because we've had so many people that have reached out. So we continue to give our services to people in help and need any way that we can. We don't have all the answers. We're kind of limited to what we can do, but we try to help out people as much as possible. Yeah.
And Mike, if our folks should contact you if they want, give them the help you can.
Please email or call us. Our info is all on the legislature website, and please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll try to connect you to resources as best we can.
Very good. Hey, many thanks to St. Albans Democratic Rep Mike McCarthy and St. Albans Town Republican State Rep Casey Toof. Thanks a lot for the time. Thanks for watching. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. See ya.